I really did grow up reading and listening to Paul Harvey, news and commentary. And there really was something special about those old transistor radios. My grandpa was a big Atlanta Braves fan, and so we would always listen to the Braves on the radio. And at nighttime, when those big signals would just expand, we would love to listen to WSB radio out of the south of Atlanta. And WSB stands for Welcome South, Brother. And we would listen to WLW out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And that was a big deal for a little kid growing up in the deep south. But I realized that our country was a lot bigger than just my neighborhood. Our country is a lot bigger than just South Jersey. I started reading books when I was in junior high school. My aunt taught English at Coldwater High School in Coldwater, Mississippi. I love my Aunt Lynn. I learned to love to read by her. You know, she's the church organist at their little United Methodist Church. They only have about 40 members. She's in charge of church security. She's got a gun with her on the piano bench. She can, honest to goodness, squeeze off a couple of rounds and not miss a beat on Amazing Grace. It's amazing, Aunt Lynn. But I started reading. That was serious. No need to laugh, sir. I'm just kidding. But I remember as a boy, I would read amazing books, and I was always drawn to really bizarre writers. Some of you may have heard these names. Art Buchwald. And Art Buchwald was as far left as a writer as you could find, a columnist, but he was a brilliant writer and a brilliant communicator. Molly Ivins from Texas, some of you know her. She was a liberal too, but I loved the way she could turn a phrase. And then there were people like Irma Bombeck. Some of you know Irma Bombeck. The grass is always greener over the septic tank. When you're in 7th grade and you read Irma Bombeck, you learn to run really fast when you get off the school bus because, you know, that's not a cool thing to do. And then there was a guy that I grew up reading in the Deep South named Louis Grizzard. Many of you may know Louis Grizzard, but he told stories that were really compelling. And so all of those people influenced who I was going to become eventually as a writer and as a broadcaster. You know, we talked a lot about faith and freedom. And I believe those two things go hand in hand. And I don't care if you're a Catholic or a Methodist or a Pentecostal or a Baptist, we have a shared faith tradition. We are a nation founded on Judeo-Christian values and principles. That's our foundation. You know, I write in my book, The Deplorables Guide to Making America Great Again, that without that foundation, everything else crumbles. You see, without that foundation of faith, one nation under God, nothing else works. And I'm afraid that's what we're seeing right now in our country. You see, for far too long, we have placed our hope and our trust in political parties when we ought to be placing our hope and our trust in Almighty God. That's what we ought to be doing. Say, Todd, what are you talking about? Because I'm as far right as they come. As a matter of fact, my office at Fox News, no kidding, producer John can vouch for this, my office is on the far right side of the building. I mean, I'm a very conservative person. But you know what? I love to listen to people who disagree with me. I love it when liberals come on my radio show to discuss their opinions. I love it when people with a differing viewpoint want to come on the radio program and talk about those things. And we've got to talk about it. Look, the Constitution is under assault. Pew Research did a study in 2015. 40% of millennials believe there should be limitations on free speech. 40%. That's a big number. Talk about the recent Gallup poll on socialism. It's out of control. I warned in this book, which came out in 2017, I warned in this book that the greatest threat and the greatest story coming out of 2016 was not Donald Trump's election, but it was the rise of socialism. And what's happening? We're polarizing ourselves. That middle, Congressman Banjer, that middle part, where folks like you are, aren't many folks there anymore. Aren't many folks there. Even some liberal professors are disturbed by what's happening about free speech on campus, where a differing viewpoint is now considered to be hate speech. You know, I was at a party years ago in New York City. Somebody came up to me and they introduced themselves, and I said, well, what do you do for a living? They said, well, I work at CNN. I thought, oh, well, good for you. That must be a fun job. And they said, well, what about you? What do you do? I said, well, I work at Fox News. How can you work at such a horrible pace? Get thee behind me. I mean, it was just one of those things. And you're like, dude, we're at a cocktail party. Just, calm down. Calm down. Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Have y'all heard about this guy? Well, I'm very critical of Mayor Pete. I'm going to be openly honest about that. But I got to tell you something. A couple of weeks ago, they were giving this poor guy the what for. He's a Democrat running for president, one of 85, I think, is the last count. The guy's well-educated, war veteran, openly gay, he's married, he's white. And some of the leftists say the guy shouldn't be running for president because he's a white guy, because of the color of his skin. What's up with that? And then other people were out there saying, well, he's not gay enough. Well, what does that mean? Is he supposed to go out and start singing Broadway show tunes? I mean, what are you talking about? And what does that have to do with anything? Talk about the guy's policies, for crying out loud. And then Mayor Pete, you're out there trying to defend the guy, and then he turns around and he starts talking smack about Vice President Pence, saying that Vice President Pence doesn't like him because he's a gay man. And then we find out that video comes out that shows Vice President Pence thought he was an American patriot. It's not about skin color. It's not about sex. It's about integrity. That's what it's about.